The topic of Lecture 4 in text linguistics is grammatical cohesion and textuality. We'll discuss such cohesive devices of language as reference, ellipsis, substitution, and conjunction. When we speak or write, we don't normally confine ourselves to single phrases and sentences. We string these together to make a connected sequence. And there are words in our language which are particularly designed to enable us to do that. Consider, for example, the following piece of writing borrowed from McCarthy. One day, a lady came into our street. She had a brightly colored bonnet which seemed out of place there. It had 3 feathers and a broad blue ribbon which fluttered gaily in the breeze. There are a number of words and phrases here which indicate that these sentences belong to the same little story. In the second sentence, the word she clearly refers back to a lady. Similarly, the lexeme there looks back to our street and is only comprehensible because of that link. In both the second and the third sentences, the word which relates to the much longer phrases, a brightly colored bonnet and a broad blue ribbon, respectively, and in each case it enables the grafting of a second clause onto the main one. These words ensure that the sentences are cohesive and form a recognizable text. In linguistic literature, cohesion is defined as the use of the explicit linguistic devices to signal relations within a text or a sentence. It concerns the ways in which the components of the surface structure, that is, the actual words we hear or see, are mutually connected within a sequence. Cohesion implies the links that hold the text together and give it meaning. While analyzing cohesive means of language, we would refer to Halliday and Hassan's cohesion in English, which is regarded to be the most influential account of this linguistic phenomenon. There are 2 main types of cohesion, grammatical and lexical. Halliday and Hassan identify 5 general categories of cohesive devices that state or signal coherence in text. Reference, including coreference, ellipsis, substitution, conjunctions, and lexical cohesion. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy defines reference as a relation between expressions and what speakers use these expressions to speak about. In the assertion, George Bush is Republican, the proper name George Bush is used to refer to a particular individual, an individual about whom the speaker is going to inform something. The central question concerning reference is, how do words refer? What, in other words, is the mechanism of reference? Grammatical cohesion of the text is mainly achieved through coreference, that is, the relationship between verbal signs designating the same entity in the world of the text. Coreferential items in English include personal pronouns he, she, it, they, demonstratives this, that, these, those, the definite articles and items such as the opening lines of a famous English novel, Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy, show different types of reference at work. The schoolmaster was leaving the village and everybody seemed sorry. The miller at Crescombe lent him the small white-tilted cart and horse to carry his goods to the city of his destination, about 20 miles off, such a vehicle proving of quite sufficient size for the departing teacher's effects. In this microtext, the italicized items refer. For the text to be coherent, we assume that him and the sentence let him the small white-tilted car as the schoolmaster introduced earlier. Likewise, his destination is the schoolmaster's destination. Reference for him and his can be confirmed by looking back in the text. Such a also links back to the cart in the previous sentence. The novel opens with the schoolmaster leaving the village. The use of the definite article the implies the questions: which schoolmaster, which village? On the previous page of the novel, the two words at Mary Green stand alone, so we reasonably assume that Mary Green is the name of the village and that the character is the schoolmaster of that village. We are using more than just the text here to establish reference. The author expects us to share a world with him independent of the text, with the typical villages and their population, including their schoolmasters and millers. Cohesion can be achieved through the use of the following coreferential devices. Looking backward, that's anaphoric reference. Looking forward, that's cataphoric reference. And looking outward, that's exophoric reference. Anaphoric reference is the most common type of reference used subconsciously in everyday conversation and writing. It occurs when the writer refers back to someone or something that has been previously identified in order to avoid repetition and be more compact. In Greek, the word anaphorein meant to carry back, to refer. It is known that human mind is rather limited in its capacity to store surface materials long enough to work on them. Anaphoric use of pronouns shorten and simplify the surface text without any difficulties for the reader. For example, there was an old lady who lived in a shoe. She had so many children she did not know what to do. In this well-known children's rhyme, the pronoun she makes it unnecessary to keep saying the old woman who lived in a shoe, the old woman, or even the woman. Usually, items such as her, him, she and her, or they and them can be decoded without major difficulty, whereas other items such as it, this and that may be more troublesome because of their ability to refer to longer stretches in the text. Let's borrow an example from Halliday and Hassan. It rained day and night for 2 weeks. The basement flooded and everything was under the water. It spoiled all our calculations. Here, the pronoun it seems to mean the events of 2 weeks or the fact that it rained and flooded. That's the situation as a whole rather than one specific entity in that situation. Matters become more complicated when we look at this and that in written text. Let's compare two texts from McCarthy. You may prefer to vent your tumble dryer permanently through a non-opening window. This is not quite as neat. since the flexible house remains visible, but it does seem knocking a hole in the wall. Or the second example. Only a handful of satellite orbits are known to be changing. Such changes are usually subtle and can be detected only by long-term observations. One exception is the orbit of Neptune's large moon Triton, which is shrinking very rapidly. That is because it circles Neptune in the direction opposite to the planet's revolution, generating strong gravitational friction. These are examples which abound in the same choices of it, this, and that. Surprisingly, conventional grammars do not give satisfactory descriptions of such usage. Discourse analysts and text linguists have touched upon this problem and made very interesting observations that have a certain amount in common. They can be summed up in this way. The pronoun it cannot be used to refer back to an entity unless it's already the focus of attention. That is, the word it can't introduce an entity into the text for the first time. The word this has a dual function in a text. First of all, it can perform anaphoric reference, as in the first example, where this referred to the situation of venting a tumble dryer permanently through a non-opening window. And secondly, it can also introduce an entity into the text for the first time, placing it into the focus of attention. For instance, this introduction is fine, it's brief and precise. The word that can be used to refer across foci of attention, pushing a proposition out of central focus and marginalizing it in some way. Anaphora is the most common directionality for reference, since the identity of the conceptual content which is kept current is made plain in advance. Cataphoric reference is the reverse of anaphoric reference and is relatively straightforward. It occurs when the reader is introduced to someone or something as an abstract entity until it is identified by a co-referring expression later. Halliday and Hassan define cataphora as the use of the proform before the co-referring expression. It creates a temporarily empty position of a lingual sign until the required content is supplied. These scholars indicate that such a mechanism would work best if the distance between the proform and the co-referring expression is kept within limits, for instance, inside the boundaries of a single sentence. They provide the following example. I don't know if he is serious, but my roommate wants to walk a tightrope over Niagara Falls. In this example, the cataphoric use of the pronoun it, he, makes the speech dramatic and more expressive. Sometimes a pronoun may look ahead to entire event rather than an individual object, as in Halliday and Hassan's next example. I would never have believed it. They have accepted the whole scheme. Cataphoric reference is less common than anaphoric, but in written text it can be used for dramatic or stylistic effect as well as for such pragmatic purpose as to intensify the reader's interest, stimulating him or her to get the necessary information for filling up the gap created by the proform. In news stories and literature, examples of cataphoric use of proforms are often found in the opening sentences of the text. The initial use of cataphoric reference is considered as the manifestation of the author's communicative strategy to engage and hold the reader's attention with read-on and find-out message. McCarthy substantiates this statement with the following example. She claims Leo Tolstoy as a distant cousin. Her grandfather was Alexei Tolstoy, the famous Red Count who sided with Lenin's revolutionaries. Now, Tatiana Tolstoy has put pen to paper in her case to demonstrate that someone from the family can write compactly. In her stories of 10 to 12 typewritten pages, I somehow try to show the whole life of a person from birth to death, she says. We can't establish who she is until the second sentence, in which co-referential proper name identifies the target person as Tatiana Tolstoy, the granddaughter of Alexei Tolstoy, the Red Count who sided with Lenin's revolutionaries. Forward-looking or cataphoric reference of this kind often involves pronouns, but it can involve other reference items too, such as the definite article. For instance, the trip would hardly have been noteworthy except the man who made it. In mid-July, a powerful American financier flew to Mexico City for a series of talks with high-level government officials, including President Miguel de la Madrid and his finance minister. It should be noted that both examples of cataphoric reference are taken from the same issue of Newsweek, which underlies the most characteristic function of this phenomenon. It is pragmatic by nature, as it not only reflects the author's communicative strategy to intensify the reader's reading activity, but makes the speech more expressive and stylistically marked as well. The third type of co-referential devices is exophora, which is a reference to assumed shared worlds outside the text. Greek exo meant outside. There are three main types of exophoric reference. The first type of exophoric or outward reference is used to describe generic or abstract situations in writing. It occurs when the writer chooses not to identify a person or a thing, but instead refers to them as abstract entities by generic words such as everyone, everybody, everything, etc. For instance, everybody loves his own mother, or no one drives a car when he or she is drunk. The second use of exophoric reference is aimed to identify the referent which is not in the immediate context but is assumed by the speaker or the writer to be part of a shared world, either in terms of knowledge or experience, when anaphoric and cataphoric reference does not supply the necessary information. In English, exophoric referential items are actualized by the definite article or demonstratives this or that. For instance, the government are to blame for unemployment. It could be odd if someone replied to the statement with the question, which government? It's assumed by the speaker or the writer that the addressee will know which one, usually our government, or that of the country we are in, or we are talking about. The same sort of exaphoric reference is seen in phrases like the sun, the earth, the moon, the queen, the president, the general director, etc. The reference of which represent unique entities in the shared world of the communicants, that is, the shared world of the writer and the reader. And finally, exaphoric reference is often made to shared world which is not directly with the context at the given moment. British popular newspaper headlines sometimes make references such as "That dress Queen scolds Princess Day." Here, the reader is assumed to have followed certain stories in the press, and the reference is like a long-range anaphoric one based on intertextuality, as it directs the reader to a certain text or texts separated in time and space from the present. Another cohesive device is ellipsis. It is the omission of elements normally required by the grammar which the speaker or the writer assume are obvious from the context and therefore did not be raised. This is not to say that every utterance which is not fully explicit is elliptical. Most messages require some input from the context to make sense of them. Ellipsis is distinguished by the structure having some missing element. In face-to-face discourse, the omission of compulsory structural elements in the utterance is predetermined by the physical environment of the communication. For instance, if two people have to peel and fry potatoes, and one says to the other, "You peel and I'll fry," the fact that peel and fry are usually transitive verbs requiring a direct object in the surface structure is suspended because the context supplies the object itself. In other words, structures are fully realized when they need to be. Therefore, ellipsis is a choice made by a speaker on a pragmatic assessment of the situation and not a compulsory feature when two clauses are joined together. In written text, the missing structural element is retrievable from the surrounding text, that's context, and the way that anaphoric and cataphoric references are. For example, we meet anaphoric ellipses in the following sentence: "The children will carry the small boxes, the adult the larger ones," where the main verb "will carry" is applied from the first to the second. In cataphoric ellipses, the missing structural element is usually observed only in front-placed subordinate clauses, and it can be easily supplied from the principal clause. If you could, I'd like you to be back here at 5:30. There are three main types of ellipses in English: nominal, verbal, and clausal. Nominal ellipsis often involves omission of a noun headword. For instance, "Nelly liked the green tiles. Myself prefer the blue." Ellipses with the verbal group may cause greater problems. Linguists point out two main types of verbal ellipses: echoing and auxiliary contrasting. Echoing repeats an element from the verbal group. For instance, "Will anyone be waiting?" "Jim will, I think." Contrasting verbal ellipsis is when the auxiliary changes, as in this case: "Has she married?" "No, but she will one day, I'm sure. With clausal ellipses in English, individual clause elements may be omitted. Especially common are subject pronoun omissions such as doesn't matter, hope so, can't help you, etc. Whole stretches of clausal components may also be omitted. He said he would take early retirement as soon as he could, and he has, and the meaning that he has already done it. Another grammatical means of text cohesion is substitution. Substitution is similar to ellipses and the effect it has on the text. It occurs when, instead of leaving a word or phrase out as in ellipses, it is substituted for another, more general word. For example, which ice cream would you like? I would like the pink one. In this case, one is used instead of repeating ice cream. Like ellipses, substitution operates either at nominal, verbal, or clausal level. The items commonly used for substitution in English are the following. One or once, for instance, I offered him a seat. He said he did not want one. Do, for instance, did Mary take that letter? She might have done. So or not, do you need a lift? If so, wait for me. If not, I'll see you there. And the last substitutive entity is same. For instance, she chose the rose task and I chose the same. It should be noted that both ellipses and substitution assume a lot from the context. They proceed on the basis that omitted and substituted elements are easily recoverable and therefore natural in speech situations where a high degree of contextual support is available. The last grammatical means of text cohesion we would like to focus on are conjunctions. Conjunctions make grammatical contributions to textuality in a specific way. A conjunction does not set off a search backward or forward for its referent, but it thus presupposes a textual sequence and signals a relationship between these segments. It is not at all easy to list definitively all the items that perform the conjunctive role in English. Halliday and Hassan have classified English conjunctions, over 40 items, according to the logico-semantic types of relationship they can establish between textual segments. As a result, they offer the following functional semantic classes of conjunctions. Additives that comprise such conjunctions as and, in addition, further, etc. Adversatives, but, however, etc. Causal, because, consequently, since, as, etc. And temporal, including such conjunctions as then, subsequently, after, before, etc. Halliday and Hassan focus on polysemantic nature of frequently used conjunctions such as and, since, so, etc., whose meaning can be defined on the basis of contextual information. For example, we can observe the wide use of the conjunction and in the examples given below, where the meaning of this conjunction varies according to the linguistic context. For instance, she is intelligent and she is very reliable. In this case, and has an additive meaning. I have lived here for 10 years and I have never heard of that pub. This time, conjunction and has an adversative meaning and can be substituted by the conjunction but. The third example is, he fell in the river and caught a chill, where and has a causal meaning. And finally, I got up and made my breakfast. The conjunction and expresses temporal sequence in this example. Thus, we have discussed grammatical means of text cohesion and the mechanisms of their functioning in the text. We have analyzed such cohesive devices of the English language as anaphoric, cataphoric and exophoric references, as well as ellipses, substitution and functional semantic types of conjunctions, focusing on their specific roles in text cohesion. We traditionally finish our lecture with a list of references. Thank you for attention.